Listen to the vibes.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Vibes. I'd love to welcome here Elijah Nisenboim, and he's an author, and you also created some breath work.
Mm-hmm. I
Well,
did.
let's get
Well,
to
I
know you
mean,
a little bit better. Tell us a little bit
sure.
more about you.
Well, I didn't create breath work. And if only I could, every time someone breathed, I could get a royalty for it. But um, well, breath work is a generic term that just means the conscious use of breathing. Because of all your internal organs, only your lungs can be operated manually. So breath work is the manual operation of your lungs. And I I was a musician in my 20s, and long story, it's in my book, but I ended up getting exposed to this breathwork practice. I was living in Canada at the time, and he was moving. He had a training in San Francisco. I came out to San Francisco. It's 1990, and ended up moving there and sort of running his operation for about 10 years, and then founded my own technique. So I have my own, I'm the founder of a breathwork technique, but it comes from a family of mouth breathing practices that go back 5,000 years to India. So what I'm mostly known for out in the world, 50, as I say, 50 feet from any building I'm teaching in, I'm famous, is breath work. So in this particular style of breath work, like you're basically lying on your back and hyperventilating for an hour without stopping. I can show it to you if you want to see a little
Sure.
demonstration. All right, I'm going to put on my original sound. You may want to mute yourself because it might echo, just so that you can hear me. So you're breathing really full. If people want to do this with me, do this. There's a little demo on the front of my website, Effiji Breath, that people can. It's free and they can try it. So you're breathing in the chest through the mouth, focused on the inhale. And you do it like that for 60 minutes without stopping. So, the power of that is that it takes you to an altered state and it clears trauma and it takes you on a journey into your inner life, because breath is the ultimate power. It's the power to live. It is the force of the universe inside of oxygen. But the metaphor to me of that you can manually operate your breathing or not is that it's you're an animal. So as an animal, your breathing will just happen naturally. But if you choose to breathe, you're choosing to try to extract that potential of the universe that's in breathing. But the metaphor is the same in your life. You can just be an animal or just do whatever. Just follow the herd. You don't have to think about your life. You're going to still stay alive and still be alive. But if you decide that you want to make a better life, then you start to think about it. You consciously take charge of that. And the purpose of doing breath work is to become more conscious. And that breath in puts light in your inner world, puts light in your unconscious. And that's that's the essence of what I've been doing for the last 35 years, at least
Well,
with my public life.
so what kind of music did you play?
Well, I still play music, and I was a singer-songwriter in my 20s and trying to get a record deal. Um, I played a lot of instruments, but I was like, piano and guitar singing. And I've always had a recording studio. This is probably my favorite subject because music is my favorite thing in the world. And I've had recording equipment probably since I was 15, so I still do, but now I have a pretty elaborate recording studio in my house. I have three pianos in my house. I have probably 25 guitars. I studied Indian music. A couple of years ago, I finally learned to play drums, and so I play a lot of instruments. And but I started in 2012. I started to compose my own music for breathwork. So if people go on this any streaming service, Spotify, Apple Music, and look me up, I have 25 volumes of music, so 25 hours of music for breathwork. And I've sort of created my own genre. I was a terrible, I mean, I was a mediocre songwriter, but being in front of people and performing, I didn't have the right ego to like demand that people would want that attention from me. And if I got gigs where I was like playing in the background, I had a power to sort of influence the room. Like if I was playing at a cocktail thing for a wedding or something. And in a way, the music for breathwork, it's very evocative and powerful, but it's meant to like draw you back into yourself, not, and that's why I started composing music for breathwork because I was just using music that was powerful to me because a lot of the music that I grew up in that era, it was revolutionary in a way, rock and roll. The sound of the drums or crunchy guitars or whatever, but it was still familiar to people. And I wanted to create things that people were not paying attention to. And so my music has a certain force to it without having an identity or a narration quality to it. So, yeah.
Whenever people sing, they have to use a certain breath work, right?
Say that again.
Whenever people sing,
Yeah, well, before I got into breathwork, I did study. I studied voice training a little and breathing and voice, and I even taught a little bit. But breathing in the center of the chest, in through your mouth, is the most counterintuitive thing because for acting or singing, your diaphragm sits up here like this, and when you breathe in through your nose, it goes down and you breathe into your belly and then you can access kind of an emotional response inside and then and also regulate the for singing like the sound coming out but that's look, my voice teacher was in for acting, so he used breathing to like kind of access emotional things but more for control. So yeah, this is nothing like that. I mean, every time I come across artists or singers or whatever, well, even yoga people and pranayama and stuff, they're like, this is dangerous what you're doing, or doctors even. I mean, I had a center in San Francisco for years that was right near the hospitals, and doctors would come in and argue with me that I was hyperventilating and I was creating all these problems, and yeah, and doctors in my family too.
how dare you want to breathe?
Well, how dare you question the matrix? um,
Right?
well, I think when people hyperventilate, like, and you're like, you have a panic attack and and you're doing this thing with your breathing, it's because there's a trauma inside, there's a memory of a trauma, and it's trying to release. So the Western medical profession back in the day, I got nothing against Western medicine, but was saying, this was bad. Like you want to stop that. As most of Western medicine sort of says, is that you want to stop the symptoms, and whereas in spiritual work and personal development work, you want to bring out what's inside because you don't want to be controlled by it, and that's ultimately the purpose of my work.
And you work a lot with people that are dealing with trauma. Did you do the same with your writing?
Uh, well, it's funny. I mean, I didn't. The word I was using all these years wasn't trauma, but it has become a popular word in the last couple of years, and I realize it's a good way to frame what I do. I mean, ultimately, I just see people, as always saw people, as having a life purpose, a potential, and that I knew before I even do breath work, just being the kind of person I was or sensitive, I could read where people, well, we all can read. other people. We see other people's problems. We're very enlightened about that. But I had a natural attunement to understanding, and also when people generally wanted to tell me their problems, I was that kind of a person. So when I started doing breath work and I could see all this stuff actually coming out into the light, it was sort of this confirmation to me of what I already felt or knew. So I just use that to free people. But if you ask, well, free from what? Like, trauma and conditioning is at the root of, I mean, everybody had trauma, just means whatever's unresolved, whatever you couldn't resolve at the time. So it
Mm.
could have been you got sent to your room for something that your brother did or something. Like, it doesn't have to be, even something you remember. So that's trauma and conditioning, which I think is probably a more relevant topic to what's going on in society. We had this old chat before we got on the air, just talking about how we're not going to talk about what's going on in society, but people question conditioning now, like, or whether they know it or not, they're questioning what's true. Like what they're being told by family, church, media, whatever. And because conditioning is, whether it's done for the right reasons, like even your parents or whatever, maybe they wanted to keep you safe and secure, but often conditioning is about fitting in for safety. So people are far away from who they really are. And I can see that in the way people breathe. I could always hear that because I'm very attuned to sound, like being a musician, the way people sound. But when people would do this breath work, it you would see all of it, and it'd be I still see all of it. It's this very emotional, evocative, powerful thing. And when a person's willing to go into the breath work and do that fully, like, they'll release all this, and their natural configuration of who they're meant to be will they'll go back to that, and then they can go out into life. And that's sort of what happened with me. And that's sort of why, when I was a musician and I did the breath work, and why I followed that teacher out there, was because I had piano teachers who used to hit my hand with a ruler. So that was a trauma. These old biddies with the hormone glasses or whatever. And so I had this tremendous fear about expressing myself in public. Every time I went to go play, my hands would turn to ice and stuff. So when I first did the breath work, the first thing that happened was my hands became incredibly painful, and like freakily painful, and I wanted to stop. But once I had breathed into it, the first time I did it, it changed me irrevocably. So that's why I followed that teacher out there and learned his method.
Well, with breath work, can it also help you with, say, dealing with anger issues and other things other than
Yeah.
quote unquote
Well,
trauma?
I think if trauma's the cause, then anger's a symptom. And anger, worry, anxiety, control, blame, what are we missing? Sadness, depression, frustration, rage. Like, all these things they're definitely human. They're human, like everybody has them in some way or another, but they are all a function of being disconnected from who we really are. So if you can release the energy, then, like, anger, for example, just as is, well, in Chinese medicine, they say anger is the will to become. Like, anger rules the liver. It's thought of as a good thing. It's a creative power. Anger is trying to reset boundaries and put things in order. I mean, if you beat somebody up or throw a plate through a window, that's not anger. That's an action.
Hmm.
But if you think of anger as a state, it is a state of creative power trying to, like, make your energy go out. I mean, if because so generally, when things are out of order, you're not able to be in your flow. One symptom would be anger. So certainly, when somebody I do a lot of different things, but the breath work's at the center of it. But if I'm working with somebody, privately or in a program or whatever, I want them to be able to experience whatever they feel because that's what's there. But how to get it to be free, to not be stuck in it, or it's something with anger. Like if I'm angry with you and I just think this is your fault and then I beat you up, like that's not obviously probably not productive for my life. So it isn't I think let's just separate the ability to know what to do, what how to interpret what you're feeling, what what to do with what you're feeling, and how that informs the way that you're going to live your life. Like I think these are two different things. So I use the breath work to kind of clear the blocks and the resistance, because that's what trauma creates, is energy is stuck and it doesn't want to move, and then you spend your life trying to avoid the pain of that, so you're always avoiding anything that will touch it, even though you need the energy to move. But after that, and that's sort of the second part of my work with people, is how do you manifest your life, when you're just because I'm free doesn't mean I know how to live. And that's sort of a different process, is how do you manifest who you really are out in your life. And particularly if you have trauma and conditioning, your tendency is to make choices and live your life in the wrong way. And so just because you free your energy up doesn't mean you're going to know how to do it right. It's a process.
Well, I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier that you're an author. How many books do you have?
Three. Here's a fun trauma story. I mean, I failed most of school. I didn't read my first book till I was 15. I
Hmm.
just gamed the system, and when I remember being in elementary school, realizing that we did our homework and we had to like turn it in and sign something or something. And I just realized, like, if I just signed and said I did it, I didn't. So I just didn't do anything till high school. When I got to high school, I had no skills. So when first I was doing many sessions in the mid 2000s, and I I could hear I was repeating something, so I wanted to write it down, and I realized like there was an idea of what I didn't know what my work was. I was just doing my work with people. So it took me 7 years to write my first book because I didn't know how to write. I was, and then in 2020 I wrote my second book right here. It's called The Liberated Life. um, A Liberated Life, is a little songwriter playing words, because it's not the liberated life, because it's a little bit of a memoir, but it's also about the process of liberating yourself. But this book, The Trauma Code, which I'm proud of, is only 100 pages. Took me a week to write 300 pages, but took me 2 years to make it 100 pages. So this is the closest I've come to sort of explaining what my work is. So and in the last 2 years, I tasked myself with I like a list, newsletter list, and I just started writing every day, and it was grueling and painful and difficult, but I found my voice and I've learned how to write. So now I'm actually I can my writing sounds like the way I talk, but that took me um, 3 books in 25 years. So,
Wow. What's your other book?
the first one's called, do I have a copy? No. It's called What's in Your Roots, Making the Unconscious Conscious. It's, they're all personal growth books. That book was really, without being about breath work, it was just about kind of a lot about the mind. And the second book is a little bit on the in between. There's a lot about the breath work, everything that I sort of thought philosophically about it. But the trauma code is, it really is the system that I do with people. And the trauma code, what it really means is that people think of trauma as garbage, like, it's something you want to get rid of. It's a bad thing that happened. So whenever people do personal development work or go away from sort of traditional methods, they think, okay, I want to get rid of this bad thing. So, and I'm saying that trauma has an intrinsic value in fulfilling your life purpose. There's a lesson that you need to unlock that's inside the lesson, that's inside the experience of trauma. So, trauma is the compost. And if you don't, it's sort of like my phone. If I swipe it, then I unlock the code, then I get all the access to what's in my phone. So people live in this unconscious resistance to the pain of the past, and then they live in the adverse effects of trauma. But if they can open up to it, then and learn and get that lesson, then they unlock the trauma code, that very problem becomes a solution. And everybody can relate to this because nobody's going to say like some of your bad breakups or these terrible things that have happened in your life didn't aren't part of the wisdom and the way that you move forward. But that's just something I observed over, tens of thousands of people, and myself, of course.
Hmm. Well, if someone wants to get a hold of you, how do they do so?
Uh, Effiji Breath, EFFIJI, effijibreath.com. And you can sign up for a newsletter if someone doesn't want to hear from me every day. You can either delete it or just don't get on my newsletter list. You can read my book, and there's a community forum. Those are all free. And then I have classes sometimes virtually, and I'm traveling in person. And then I have programs for people who really want to dig in.
So you work with people one on one and in a group setting?
Yeah, I mean, right now, mostly I work in group settings. I did a lot of personal private work. So it's it's actually the biggest ticket item is individual work because I sort of discourage that in a way because I like the program and the group work. It's not the place to start. Like some people, I used to do readings and private breath work, and then also sort of like sessions with people. But I'm not really solving that level of the problem. Like if, like a class is like a $20 problem, a private session's whatever, 150 or $200 problem. I'm more about like the person looking for the person who has urgency around really changing their life. I'm doing a program starting February 2025. There's only 12 spots, 10 are filled, but there's 12 spots, and I'm going to spend 9 months with people, some of it in person, some of it online. So that's my favorite thing to do for the right person.
Is your website the only place people can get your books?
Amazon, and
Okay.
it took us forever to figure out Kindle, so I'm just on Kindle, and then the audiobook is on streaming, as is my previous one, Liberated Life. So yeah, Amazon. Isn't
Well,
everything on Amazon?
right. Exactly. And the almost necessary evil in this world, do you have social media?
Yeah, I have a partner, Sarah, a business partner. We've been together for 12 years, and we, it's not that we hate social media, but um, for the kind of work that I do, I realize like, well, I'm not attracted to it really. And I realize that the kind of people who spend a lot of time on social media don't tend to end up being our people. Like there was this whole period during the pandemic, if you don't mind me saying this, is that like about how people would get business through Facebook ads and this and social media. And it's just another dog and pony show or whatever. And my I've been in business for 35 years doing healing work because I don't think of myself as in business. I just think of this powerful connection between humans. And I just during the pandemic I thought, well, it's so good not to travel and I could just do my work online and then just really realize like this is not for me. So we're on Instagram. We put stuff up sometimes in Facebook, but other than that, nah.
Elijah, thank you so much for
Yeah,
your time today, man. I really
yeah.
appreciate it.
I love your energy. You're such a open listener. I can feel that.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. Appreciate that. And I also want to thank all you folks out there. If you are new to the channel, I hope you'll come back. Please hit that subscribe button. And I have to mention something else. YouTube has decided that it wants to audit and purge. So I have lost over 500 subscribers in just the last few days. So check to see if you are still
Yeah.
subscribed. Everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favourite podcasts. And on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network